Good morning, everyone. We'll get the meeting started. Just to let everyone know, Chair Blaise a bit under the weather today, so I'll be chairing, and we'll start the meeting as we usually do with the TransSecure Awards. We begin every Transit Commission meeting by celebrating OC Transpo employees who have responded in times of crisis with compassion, quick action, and a true commitment to the safety and well-being of others. Today, you'll hear two remarkable stories. The TransSecure program honors employees who have responded to emergency situations without hesitation, with kindness, and with tremendous courage. It reinforces OC Transpo's continued commitment to the safety and security of our customers and the entire Ottawa community. As a matter of fact, since the program's inception in 1989, TransSecure has responded to over 10,000 of safety and security issues like medical emergencies, break-ins, accidents, fires, suspicious situations, or any other incidents where someone feels unsafe or threatened. In 2015 alone, 263 TransSecure calls were logged. With that being said, here are the stories of OC Transpo's TransSecure recipients for the month of May and June of this year. Voici donc l'histoire de récipiendaires de prix TransSecure d'OC Transpo pour le mois de mai et juin de cette année. I know you will be as impressed as I am by these exemplary transit employees. Je suis convaincu que vous serez aussi impressionné que moi par le geste posé par ces employés exemplaires de transport en commun. May recipients. Although there were 18 TransSecure calls in the month of May, one emergency situation stands out from the rest. On the evening of May 17, 2016, several OC Transpo operators and a fleet supervisor noticed another operator in distress in the Memorial Garden of OC Transpo's main building at St. Laurent Boulevard. They immediately conducted a visual assessment for breathing and pulse of their fellow colleague's condition. It became evident that he required medical attention. Without hesitation, the men began performing chest compressions and called 911 for assistance. They continued to take turns performing CPR until emergency medical services arrived on scene a few minutes later. Upon arrival, Ottawa Police and a transit special constable continued applying chest compressions while EMS prepared the defibrillator. It was at this time that the operator's breathing and pulse was restored. Thanks to Bruce, Thomas, Trevor, and Yan's quick thinking and heroic actions, their fellow colleague was revived and taken to the hospital for further treatment. The paramedics at the scene and the doctor at the hospital confirmed that the actions of these men were the reason the operator survived and is able to tell his story. I'll ask Bruce, Thomas, Trevor, and Yan to come up to receive their certificates. And moving on to June recipients, there were 15 TransSecure calls for transit employee assistance in the month of June. On the evening of June 11th, transit operator Kurt was contacted by OC Transpo Control searching for several robbery suspects who were reported to have possibly boarded a bus. Based on the detailed description provided over the broadcast, Kurt was able to identify the suspects in question who were on board his bus. Faced with potentially dangerous situation, he remained calm and quietly contacted control using his radio. He then pulled the bus over and calmly announced to the passengers on board that they were running ahead of schedule, needed to stop, and that they would resume their route shortly. The Ottawa Police Services arrived shortly thereafter and completed a search of the bus, leading to the arrest of the men who were taken into police custody. Thanks to Kurt's quick and strategic thinking, these robbery suspects were held accountable for their crime, and nobody was injured in the process. So I invite Kurt to come up and receive his award. So once again, please join me in recognizing these OC Transport employees who through the TransSecure program have helped those in need in our community. I was joking with Kurt about the next time they tell me the bus is in advance, should look around and be careful on the bus if they're early on schedule. Okay, we'll start with declarations of interest. Regrets, we have regrets from Councillor Cloutier, who's on city business, and of course Chair Blais, who's sick, and Councillor Eglai as well. Confirmation of minutes, regular meeting June 15th, special meeting June 27th. Are those carried? Communications as listed. We have Councillor Deans would like to hold one of those items on the O-Train schedule. So Commissioner Miller, if you can bring that motion forward to suspend the rules. The mics.
Thank you. Pursuant to Section 89.3 of the Procedures Bylaw 2014-441, the Transit Commission approves the addition of this item for consideration and discussion by the Commission at today's meeting.
Okay, so we'll come back to that one. Other communications, General Manager of Transportation Services Department on Transit Commission, Inquiry 216, Transit System Subsidies, carried. Item number 1, status update, Transit Commission motions and inquiries for the period ending September 2nd. Is that received? Item number 2, 2016 operating and capital budget. There's a technical amendment on that from Commissioner Miller as well.
Just some questions.
Sorry.
So we can...
You have some questions? Okay, so we'll hold that one as well. There is no presentation on that, but staff are here to take any questions. Yeah. Okay.
There we go. Whereas Document 1, Operating Results Summary, June 30th, 2016, of Report ACS 2016-CSD-FIN-003, circulated by the agenda, contains errors, and whereas as a revised Document 1 was circulated to the Transit Commission on Friday, September 16th, 2016, therefore, it be resolved that the Transit Commission approve that Document 1 of the published report be replaced by the attached revised vision.
Okay. So we'll come back to that one. Councillor Nussbaum has questions on it. Yeah, and we'll carry that motion. Carried. Final items, Councillor's item, Councillor Blais' report from the Canadian Urban Transit Association. So we have to suspend the rules, waive the rules for that to receive it because it wasn't circulated with the agenda. Commissioner Milner.
Whereas Document 1, Chair Blais' report from the Canadian Urban Transit Association 2016 Annual Conference of Report ACS 2016 CCS-TRA-002 was not ready in time to be distributed with the report as part of the Transit Commission agenda for this meeting, and whereas the Chair has since issued Document 1 for distribution, therefore it be resolved that the Transit Commission approve the addition of Document 1 to the report ACS 2016 CCS-TRA-002 for consideration by today's Commission meeting pursuant to Section 89-3 of the Procedures Bylaw.
Is that carried? Carried. And receive reports received as amended. Okay, so we'll go back and we'll start with Councillor Deans on O-Train schedule.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And this has been a bit of an ongoing bugaboo with me on the Trillium line. And I have come to appreciate that we're never going to meet the original promise that I know was before your time, Mr. Manconi, but there was an original promise of 8 minutes. And I know that you have all been working hard to down the time, and you've got it somewhere around 11 minutes, maybe just a little over 11 minutes, which is better than the 15, but not anywhere as close to the 8 minutes as we have been promised. But that's not even my issue now. My issue now is that there isn't a consistent schedule. It used to be at 8 o'clock, 8:15, 8:30, 8:45. We knew the trains were leaving every 15 minutes. But now, I think it's because of that CTC system, there's not as much predictability in when those trains are leaving. So the nature of my inquiry is to say, can we not somehow tell the passengers when the trains are going to leave? So if I get off a bus at Greenboro and I don't have to run, there's a visual screen, display screen that says it's going to be 5 minutes before that train departs the station, even if it's sitting there. And I know they do this. The answer to my inquiry is we can't ring a bell. I don't want you to ring a bell. I want some audio and some visual signage notification to customers when that train is going to be leaving. And I know GO Train does it all the time. When I get to Union Station in Toronto and want to go west to Port Credit, there's visual display screens in the terminal buildings that says Train 7, Port Credit, leaving 5 minutes. And then when I get up to where the train is, it'll say Train 7 to Port Credit is leaving in 1 minute. Stand clear of the doors are now closing. And I'm assuming that when we get the Confederation line, we're going to have some sort of, it says we'll have departure notifications, arrival notifications. We want departure notifications, but presumably that's all in the works. So I'm just wondering, why couldn't we do it now on the Trillium line? It would take a lot. It would help a lot of people with their daily commutes, because right now I hear from people all the time that they just feel that they're sitting too long. They ran for a train and then they've sat up to 12 minutes waiting for it to leave the station. So it's adding a lot of commute time to their daily time, and I think just with some notification we could resolve that issue. So I guess my question is it possible? What would it take? What would it cost? And when can we get this done?
Thank you, Councillor. I agree with a lot of your comments, and the inquiry, if it was not clear, the short answer is yes, we will be having those notification systems, and the PTIF list that you just approved has that in there, and it's also noted in this response. And yes, the Confederation line will have the systems that you're talking about. What I do want to comment on is the schedule, the production of a schedule, and people waiting a long time and so forth. I will respectfully disagree with you on that, because what the great benefits of this Trillium line is, and there's been a lot of negative attention focused on somebody promised in 8 minutes and we didn't get it. Well, here's what you got. You got amazing new trains, wait time maximum 5 minutes. And the number one customer issue is people do not want to wait. And I can tell you, I'm on that MUP just about every second day. I walk that line. That's one of my trails where I walk. And I can tell you that we have done an amazing job as a city, because all of your goals that are in your master plan, your transportation master plan, your official plan, you're actually achieving it through this Trillium line. There's a brand new student residence. I think it's 20 floors, 21 floors. I was out there Sunday watching all those new kids using that system. The new condos up there, so the intensification is occurring. The great message we should all be delivering to everybody is, okay, we didn't achieve 8. The maximum you wait now is 5 minutes. And that's a great service. And yes, to your point, you're absolutely right. We need to put that automated system there. It's part of the plan. It'll be part of the Confederation line. What I've tasked Mr. Scrimgeour and Mr. Charter with, and it builds upon your inquiry, is what's the message to, because putting out a published schedule I don't think will help anybody, because I don't think that's what they're looking for. They're looking for do I have to run or not? Your point is very valid. I saw someone running on Sunday. I said, slow down. If you miss that, you just got to wait 5 more minutes. And they went, oh, that's great service. You know, and the Confed line's even better than that. And that's going to be our message on the Confed line also in terms of what your wait time is, because that's very important to the customer. So ridership is up again. We're finalizing the numbers. We had a bounce in ridership last year. And when they are waiting for the passing track issues, they're waiting in air-conditioned cars, climate-controlled, whereas before they were waiting for extended periods of time for the next train. So I agree with your comments, and I would just encourage all of us to talk about that. Wait time is down to 5 minutes, which is very good service.
Can we talk about that a bit more? Because that's not what I hear from my constituents. I hear them say they can wait up to 12 minutes sitting on a train for the train to leave. So what is the 5-minute service?
The train is there.
But it's not leaving.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's waiting for the passing tracks. It's a safety feature.
Right.
You went to a double track with passing tracks, so they're sitting there. Before the expansion, they would have been waiting on a platform, cold, hot, and so forth. Now they are waiting.
No, that's better, but it's not addressing the fundamental issue, which is how much time do they have to commit in order to get from one end of the line to the other. And they just, if they get off a bus or they get out of their car in the parking lot and they see the train sitting there, they feel like they have to run. But if there's a display that says it's not leaving for another 6 minutes, then they don't have to run. So I think we're close to being on the same page here, but I don't think we should have to wait for the Confederation line in 2018 to have this system in place on the Trillium line now. So when can we get it?
I can't give you a definite date, but those two gentlemen have been tasked with seeing if we can get it in sooner than that. It's not tied to the Confederation line. The Trillium line can
So have you already purchased the system?
We're going to go out and purchase it.
Now?
Yes.
Okay, so like within 6 months we can have it?
Councillor, you know how I work. If I can't give you a date,
I know, you ain't giving dates, but I really like dates.
What I will do is I will update you as soon as I know the timeline from Mr. Scrimshaw.
So you would commit to putting this system in as soon as possible on the Trillium line that would have audio and visual displays of departure times?
It will have features that will address a lot of the concerns you're talking about, and I'll walk you through when I know exactly what we're getting.
Okay, so I would just leave you with get on with it because we need that system. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Deans. And next up is item number 2 on the operating capital budget. Councillor Nussbaum held that item, so if there's anyone else with questions, please let me know. Councillor Nussbaum.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, all. Thank you very much to the staff for the report. I was just trying to get a little bit of a handle on how things are going with ridership. We heard at the June meeting that the numbers up until that stage, and I don't know if those were Q1 or included Q2 numbers, looked really good, which was great to hear. I don't recall if it was a stabilization or an increase from the 2015 numbers. I know the 2015 calendar year was down from 2014. I know we went from 97.076 to 96.5 in 2015, so we had a decline. But I think what we heard in June, which was really encouraging, was that numbers so far in 2016 were looking good. And again, I don't recall if the observation was stabilization or increased. But then in this report before us on page 3, when addressing the shortfall in the fare revenue, the sentence in page 3 says, the shortfall in the fare revenue is mainly associated with customers opting for lower fare types and ridership levels. So I'm just trying to understand a little bit. I know they aren't published numbers yet, but are up until the end of June, what observations do staff have about ridership over the 2015 numbers? Thanks.
Yes, Mr. Chair, so we've had months, and I'm going to get Pat to elaborate a little bit more on that. We've had months where it's been up, we've had months where it's flat, and months which just slightly lower, but overall things seem to have stabilized. And then, as it's noted in the report, customers are making their own fare choice, so it's revenue to budget, I'm just going to ask Pat to summarize where we are on overall in terms of ridership that has a direct impact.
Thanks, John. Mr. Chair, the ridership is slightly higher than it was in 2015 to this point in 2016. When we look at the most recent 12 months, we're at a level that is higher than it has been since the beginning of 2014. So it's not a large increase, but it's back to the level of 2 years ago. But as John says, there are months that are up and months that are down.
So it's, sorry for my being dunce about this, but it's a bit easier to talk about 2016 thus far, because that's what the report refers to. So if we look at January to June 2016, are our numbers higher, the same, or lower than that period in 2015?
Higher.
So then why does the report say the shortfall in the fare revenue is associated with ridership levels? Is it because we anticipated a greater increase than actually happened?
We're very close to the budgeted number, but the revenue is primarily because of the way that people are choosing to pay their fares, that we're selling more monthly passes and fewer single-ride fares, so the average amount that we receive per customer is lower than budgeted. I'm not saying lower than last year.
Okay, so then ridership levels maybe shouldn't be, so it's not a factor because they're up over 2015. And I know in the long-term financial plan, the anticipated increase, I think, was 2%. So I can see why, if they're less than 2, you would have less fare revenue than anticipated. So I'm just trying to understand, is that a valid statement? Are we just we're above 0 but under 2? Is that a fair observation of what's happened so far in ridership levels?
Generally correct, yes. I think the paragraph under the paragraph after the sentence that the councillor is referring to gives a fuller explanation than the previous sentence.
Okay, so 0 to 2 is roughly where we are in the first 6 months of 2016.
That's a fair.
That's all I was looking for. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Mallows next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, colleagues. I was a little anxious waiting this report because I remember last year it was essentially at this time that we got the bad news that we were $80 million in the hole. So now we're $3 million in the black. So that's good news. There is no doubt about that. $3 million, that number sounds familiar for some reason. Just kidding. I did notice, though, in the capital plan, there are some red flags. Some projects that have not received any funding, or there have been no funds committed. Again, not a large number. You're 75% committed this far in the fiscal year, halfway through, which is very good. But I'm just wondering, because we've protected operations and maintenance from a personnel perspective, whether or not some of the programs where we're not moving forward is because of a capacity to actually move forward, or is it just a decision you've made to action those projects in the second half of the fiscal year, for example?
It's the latter. It's a conscious decision to stage things, and I can assure the Commission that these are your projects, right? We report to you, and if there's a commitment to do them, if we have a capacity issue, there's innovative ways to bring in surge capacity to execute on them.
Could we just talk about 908-189, page 5 of 5? It's a lot of money set aside for that, $4 million.
Sorry, could you give me the number again?
908-189, third from the bottom on page 5.
Is that transitway structures?
Yes. 1.74. looking for a warm fuzzy.
So, infrastructure, yeah.
Allocate.
That's our infrastructure services folks. That's their budget. They manage all the structures along the Transway for life cycle management. So if you needed some details on that, I'd be glad to track it down for you.
It'll be the infrastructure folks.
Yeah.
But that's not a red flag for you.
No.
Okay. Okay. That's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just looking at the forecast for the year end, and the I know it's for forecasting a surplus, nice for a change, but we're concerned about the revenues being in a fairly significant deficit. Really, the savings are coming from operations rather than that, and how that would forecast into next year. Because if we're not going to be reaching the revenue goals this year, even though the ridership is slightly up, how is that going to impact when we go to, I know it's supposed to be neutral, but I don't know if it's going to be going to the no express fares, et cetera, and all the changes that we're making at that time. Do you have a handle on how that's going to work and whether we can handle that without having a major budget problem for next year?
I believe so, Mr. Chair. And you know, the first part of your question about how did we get this surplus, I can assure you that the principals this management team put to my right here, they get the credit because they've been watching every single nickel and rigorous management oversight. And one of the key principles was we were not going to compromise frontline service at all to stay within, to stay in the black on the budget. So, you know, when you get into some of the documents, the discretionary spending and so forth, that's the stuff that we really kept an eye on. Service trumped everything. We did not want to compromise service. So I think we're okay going into what's coming with express fare elimination and so forth. And the revenue ridership is always a delicate balance, and that's why I believe Mr. Scrimgeour was being very cautious, and so am I, on, yeah, it's up a little bit. You know, I'm not saying, yay, ridership is skyrocketing, and, you know, just being cautious because of exactly your point. It's a delicate balance, and we want to make sure we stay in a surplus or at least neutral.
But we did budget based on not having it really going up very much. So, and we're having over a $4 million deficit in the fare part of it, despite the careful budgeting. I know you're keeping a close eye on expenditures, but only so much time you can squeeze. And you're squeezing from what was approved. And I know that the fuel costs have been a big part of that, and that's not going to happen forever, probably. But I'm just really a little concerned about if we are having this, is the fare, the amount we budget for fares received, is this telling us something we have to change in that may have an impact then on next year's budget? Because I know the budget coming up is going to still be very tight.
No, I've been working very closely with the treasurer, and she's very supportive of the cautious approach on ridership, because if you start to project very high ridership levels...
I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking that you're projecting a loss this year.
I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah. So you're going to be probably downplaying the revenue that would be received or could be, in which case we have to be even tighter on the operations.
What we're doing is we're looking at where the forecast is going on ridership. So that's slightly up. So we'll stay very cautious on the ridership level.
Okay. And this is only half the year, I know, but it seems to be trending that way. It's almost, they're forecasting almost double what was done at the end of June.
Yeah, and I think the big variable on revenue is people are making those choices that we always said they could with Presto. They're, you know.
And it's possible we pick that up and we don't have express fares. That'll be interesting to see. Okay, thank you.
Okay, the last speaker I have on the list is Commissioner Milner, if there's anyone. Okay.
Just steal your mic. Yeah, oh, here we go. Echo. Thanks for the report. I found it very thorough, and I was happy to see that, as my colleague across the table said, that we're in the black and not in the red again. One of the things that we discussed about 18 months ago was the hedging of diesel fuel when diesel prices were all over the place. This is probably a question, actually not for staff here, but Are we hedging again, and what level are we going back to that? Because fuel prices, to me at least, seem to have stabilized. I don't know if that's the same for diesel.
The expert in that area is Ms. Simonek. She's not here. I don't know if Mr. Flynn wants to speak. We are hedging, and I can tell you her great staff do a very dynamic role on that hedging. And I don't know, Brian, if you wanted to comment on percentages and so forth.
Chair, I'm not sure on the amount we're hedging. We could get back to you with that number, but I don't think it's a significant amount.
Okay, so for just looking ahead for our next fiscal year for 2017, do we have a better understanding of what our fuel costs will be? Because this is a significant variable in a good direction, but to me that raises concerns about if it flies the other direction. You know, if we're saving money now, might as well, you know, look to continue that into 17.
Well, Brian, if I could, we will. Part of what you're seeing here is the dividend on the IT project investment, where we have a very good fuel management system.
Oh, okay.
With, I don't know if you remember when we took some of you through the tour, the nozzle, when they connect up with the vehicle, there's an instant download of odometer reading and so forth, so Mr. Charter's optimizing the fleet in terms of maintenance and so forth. There's been a lot of work with our great supervisor team on when we're idling and so forth, and so all those things start to add up. So again, it's watching all those pieces, and with finance and with Brian and his team, we will look at the hedging, and they do the great work on the back office on that stuff.
That's good to hear. My next question was on the insurance costs. Are these increased premiums, or are they payouts for past suits? So
I'll walk very carefully with what I disclose here, and I look to my legal partner over there. Payouts, and if we need to get into details, I suspect he's going to want you to go in camera.
Okay. I won't ask any more there, then. Lastly, page 5, we have additional revenues of $1.802 million. I know this is a rounding error. Can we get just slightly more detail? Very last paragraph.
Sorry, what was the question?
Just the additional revenue of $1.8 million that was incorporated into the budget. What is this?
That was your solutions page last year, where we were tasked with how do we balance the budget. So we had increased partnership revenue, which is the condo arrangement, where we're trying to encourage developers to pay for a year worth of transit and give it to the new condo owners. So there's been some uptake on that. That's how much we had to find on that. Increased revenue for advertising, and then the Canadian Tire Centre arrangements, just like the Blues Fest, in terms of starting to recover our incremental costs above and beyond the base service. So where we're not achieving them, we're offsetting them with other savings in terms of inventory management and those types of things.
That's all very good news. And lastly, going to the capital budgets, looking at the IT budgets just as a whole, they are the only ones in my eyes that seem to be coming up against their kind of projected budgets or total authority. As we all know, if we've ever done anything technical, it always runs over because this stuff is very expensive. I'm just getting an idea of how close to completion these projects are as far as expenditures.
Mr. Chair, there's quite a number, as you can see on page 4, there's quite a number of technology-related projects which are all moving very well in various states. Some are weeks away from being complete. Some are aiming to be complete by the time the Confederation line opens. There's really a very large program to replace some legacy system which have become unworkable to maintain, unworkable to use in the modern situation. So they're all going well. Sometimes some are ahead, sometimes some are behind, but customers will benefit as each one of them gets completed over the next year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah, this is all good because I know, in our conversations there's been many times that we've talked about these legacy IT programs and how we're looking to really revolutionize the back end. So I'm really happy to see this. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Milner. Commissioner Crew.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of very brief questions. in relation to the update. Well, first of all, general comment is that when we were faced with the deficit a year ago, the general manager did make a commitment to watching every nickel, and I think that these reports are beginning to show the evidence of that. And so I'm appreciative of that. Certainly progress has been made, and I recognize that it's come at a cost. It's come with a lot of effort to get there. So just a couple of very quick comments specifically with regard to the capital works budgets, and picking up on the same line as my colleague with regard to transit way structures at 908 and 189 on page 5 of 5. That did stick out to me as one which we spent virtually nothing with $4 million budgeted. So is it just that the work was backloaded into Q3 and Q4, or are we anticipating that that we're not going to be approaching the $4 million for those expenditures that were budgeted?
I'll have to look into it. My gut tells me that this is probably not being spent at the rate it typically was spent in the past, because a good chunk of the transitway with structures is closed.
Oh, I understand.
It's being reconstructed with the Confed line. That's my gut, but I'll have to confirm.
So it may be stuff that is delayed and might be in the amount.
Or got caught up, yeah, didn't need to be done.
Okay, and then secondly, just picking up on the previous item from Councillor Deans, I just heard, you say that these signs are coming, and I noticed that in the capital budget there are a number of lines that address Trillium line expenditures. I'm wondering where the expense for these signs is budgeted and what we can anticipate in terms of a cost for this signage that you're currently looking at.
Mr. Chair, we're still scoping what the cost will be. We're trying to align the way the information appears to the customers so that it's the same between the Trillium line and the Confederation line. So we'll be getting the details from RTG of what they're procuring for the Confederation line, and if not mirroring, then finding something that does a very similar function with a similar appearance. So in order to do that, we are waiting until they've settled on their subcontractor. The other work that we have to do is to set the right way for that information system to align with where the location of the train is. Again, on the Confederation line, it's all built into the signaling system, and as you know, on the Trillium line, the signaling system is much, much less integrated. So those are the big pieces of work that need to be done. Again, as you're saying, behind the scenes. There's funding here, and there's also more funding recently approved by Council in accepting the federal PTIF funding, and those funds will be enough, but we have to work to see the details of how this is going to work.
Thank you, Mr. Scrivener. So your anticipation is that we can work within the existing 2016 capital budget for that item, or is it likely to be a line item that appears in the 2017 capital budgets?
Mr. Chair, I would say between the amount that's already approved in 2016 and previous years and the amount that was recently approved in approving the PTIF funding, we expect that to be enough to do all of the public information systems that we're planning for the complete system.
And then just a comment on something else that you raised, but certainly I would support that notion of seeking a similar technology or as similar as possible to the one that will be in the Confederation line to have a consistent visual identity. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are my comments.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Crew. Anyone else? Okay. I just have a couple of quick questions. I want to start off by thanking staff. First of all, it's no easy feat to find $4.9 million in savings in the Q2 report, so I think I want to congratulate you and thank you for your leadership and your team, Mr. Manconi, for finding those savings and efficiencies. I'm also pleased to see a bit of a bump in the ridership, but again, I think we all want to proceed with caution is what you're saying, and we don't necessarily know if there's a pattern there. What I did find interesting, though, is that the revenue is slightly down because of the type of fares that are being used. So can you speak a bit to that? Does that mean if there's a pattern that you see there, is it more loyal monthly users, or is it just, the Presto, people are moving towards that, or what is it that you see that's changing in terms of the fare patterns?
Mr. Chair, the change so far this year has been that more people are traveling with monthly passes, and fewer people are traveling with single-ride fares.
And that strictly explains the differences we're seeing. It's that change from single users to monthly.
That explains the majority of it. There's always fluctuation in how many seniors versus students versus adults are traveling in a month or in a year. There's fluctuation in how many people are buying the different fare types, how many are paying cash versus how many are using Presto cards. So there's a number of things, but the major change has been a move this year to this point towards monthly passes.
Okay. On the revenue improvements section, can we get a brief update in terms of what the, and I don't know how much detail you can get into it, but with the CTC, what sort of, did we agree to a budget for the next few years, or what was the agreement? Because I see there's a line in there that says we did not get the target we were looking for.
Conversations with Canadian Tire Centre have been initiated. There's been some positive feedback from them early summer, and I anticipate we're going to reconvene shortly to talk about the possibility of some opportunities for them from this year in terms of that. I can comfortably say I doubt we're going to get everything that was noted there, but clearly that organization understands they have a role to participate in chipping in the incremental costs like others have stepped up.
And on the condos, the condo agreements that we're getting into, can you explain a bit more about that? And is that all of them are coming on board with this, or is that dependent on the developers or the area, or how's that working in terms of trying to get more of those on board?
So I believe we have two major sites, Lansdowne and then in Westboro, with two developers. Sales are slumping right now in condos, as you know. We cannot force developers to do this, but we are, with our planning partners, having very good conversations, particularly when they are into transportation demand issues and things like that. We see it as an opportunity for them to help in our modal share quest and so forth. So we're going to continue to encourage it, and we'll track it. But if there is a shortfall in some, I know there is a shortfall in that, but we'll offset that with other efficiencies.
Okay. Thank you very much. On the report received as amended? Received. Okay. No in-camera items. Notices of motion. Any notices of motion? No. We have two inquiries, so I think Councillor Nussbaum has one, and then Councillor Leeper as well.
I won't read out the whole thing because it's long, but the gist of it, I'll just read the last sentence, which I think is pretty straightforward. Can staff please provide an update on the expected timelines for development and implementation of the new Paratranspo fare payment system, including the integrated voice response and online booking system? Okay,
we'll take that back. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you, Chair. My inquiry is, please describe in detail how $30 million in new funding between the City and Public Transit Infrastructure Fund, approved by Council on September 14th, will be used to fund LRT construction-related bus detours.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Other business? There's no other business. Adjournment? Adjourned. Adjourned. Next meeting is October 19th. Thank you.